And this is also why Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden put out years ago this book called The Real Star Wars. And Tony Craddock, my friend, just released it. I wrote the foreword to it. I had a copy of it here somewhere. And it's about these electromagnetic, radionic, and psychotronic systems. And this was released in the 80s. It's a little monograph this big. And Lieutenant Colonel Bearden knew about this. And so he began to talk about it. Now, so he could talk about it and not get in trouble, he always referred to it as Soviet technology. That was just a ruse. He had to. He had to, because he had very top secret clearances. But this information's been out for decades, but it's sort of hidden in plain sight. What I want to do is connect these dots to folks so that you understand that, yes, there are extraterrestrial civilizations. They're very concerned with what's happening on this planet. And yes, there are humans that have these assets that mimic and have reached, and I'm going to use this word carefully, parity, near equivalence with what an appearance would be of an extraterrestrial vehicle, because they have become more and more and more refined over the decades, up to and including very powerful electromagnetic systems that are transdimensional, can materialize things, if you go to Dugway Proving Grounds near Salt Lake City, near Provo, there are things going on there that look 100% ET, but they're not extraterrestrial, they're alien. They're man-made. But it's incredibly well-defined, well-developed. With that knowledge, maybe we will have discernment. And with that knowledge and discernment, maybe we won't be fooled again. This is my hope and my prayer. And if we don't get discernment, we're going to be sitting ducks, much more so than we were on 9/11. And I think that this is why, in my opinion, we have all have the responsibility to share this seminar and this information with the public, with everyone we know, as far-fetched as it may seem. Now, one of the things that I've wondered in my own mind is to what extent there have been people who are embedded in our society, who have had these scripted experiences and are sharing information that they believe to be true, but that have been completely scripted. Now, this is going to be very difficult for me to talk about. I don't like talking about personalities. You'll find that in the history of my entire career, I've talked about issues and information and not people. But with that said, I want to talk about a gentleman who I knew quite well, who's passed away, named Dr. Fred Bell. Anybody ever heard of him? A few people. Interesting character. So Dr. Bell, the name sound familiar? Bell, Alexander Graham Bell, descendant of Alexander Graham Bell. And he, in the disclosure materials, one of the only a couple people who aren't named name, rank, and serial number. And I will tell you now, first time I've ever shared this, why he's not named. He shared information very important, but I had to be very careful of what I included. Now, this gets into the sort of unique responsibility I have in this regard. And he had been given over to the MK Ultra program at the agency at birth, as a very, literally at birth, to the intelligence community, to be programmed as sort of a genius in aerospace and technology, and to work inside the system as sort of a electronically, psychotronically controlled slave. Now, that's how I would put it. Now, his parents did this with knowledge of forethought. How anyone can do this to a child, I don't know. But he was. And I was at his home and saw his badges from Hughes aircraft, from the anti-gravity chamber that Hughes had, from all the different contractors and things he had worked on. And he had gotten, and actually had met Wernher von Braun also. And his specialty, what they had trained him to do, was to develop weapon systems that would target, hit, and knock down extraterrestrial vehicles when they came out of trans-dimensional space-time into 3D. Now, I don't want to get too techie here again, but when you're going from the Andromeda galaxy, 2.5 million light years from here, to Earth, you're not going at the speed of light. It'd take you 2.5 million years to get here. That's what a light year is. It's the distance light goes in a year. So it'd take you 5 million years to go back and forth at the speed of light. Never mind the space shuttle or some piece of junk like the rockets and jets. So if you are an interstellar civilization, you are by definition trans-dimensional, because you're going to go through the crossing point of light, you're going to cross into these other dimensions, and then in point A and point B, 2.5 million light years distance, Andromeda galaxy, Earth, then is here, because you're bypassing linear space-time. Does it make sense? And you can do this through teleportation resonance systems. Anyway, so, which, by the way, we started experimenting also with in the 50s, and were able to perfect. In fact, even before then, the so-called Philadelphia experiment, which didn't happen in Philadelphia, that's another long story, I won't get into the weeds here, was in the 40s. So these electronics were being experimented with humans, but interstellar civilizations perfected this many, many, many millions of years ago. Some of them are certainly hundreds of thousands of years ago. Now what that means is that as they then come into near Earth or materialize in our solar system, at that point they're trackable in the Deep Space Network, out of NORAD and other facilities, and Alpha satellites. As they approach Earth, then they can be targeted with these electronic scalar systems and hit. And that's what's been going on for over 70 years. This is an existential threat to Earth. Now, I have personal, detailed knowledge, and so did Dr. Bell. He admitted he was involved not only in developing the technologies, but present when they were being used, actuated, and would go out and witness them. Boom, one would hit an ET craft, drop straight into the Pacific Ocean. 1965. 51 years ago. So the fact that this has been going on for 70 years or more since Roswell, and there has not been a serious pushback, an overt pushback by these interstellar civilizations, is remarkable. I doubt we would have behaved similarly. And this is why I say to people, I think you should be much less concerned about the extraterrestrial civilizations than the human. And if you want to know where the problem is, go find a mirror and look in it right now. But Dr. Bell, when he was discussing this, also would then tell me about these electronic systems that he was put through in MKUltra, where he had experiences that were trans-dimensional in consciousness, he thought were real, with beings and civilizations that were horrific, horrible. And that's how they taught him to hate the aliens. So whenever he would, that's how they got him to be enthusiastic about the science, because he had these experiences with these aliens. It was all a scripted psychotronic hologram. And he would then say, like Will Smith in Independence, "Let's go kick alien butt!" And he'd go out there, and when he would they would hit one of these ET craft and it would fall down, he would just jump up and down with joy. We killed another one of the bastards. And I'd sit in his home as he related these things and went, whoa, boy, this is very dangerous stuff. You're dealing with civilizations that have been visiting us on Earth for, dare I say, millions of years. ancient aliens, anyone? But yes, I mean, we've never been alone. And suddenly we're doing atomic weapons and the nuclear weapons and these scalar weapons and all this other stuff. And they have not pushed back yet. What does that say? It's almost a Gandhi-esque restraint. You know, when Gandhi was shot by the guy who assassinated him, he turned and blessed him and fell. The last thing he did was bless the person in a Christ-like act of forgiveness. So, you know, if they were so horrific, we would have known about it about 1945. It'd have been all over, point, set, match, finished. Now, when I was at the Vatican having a theological conversation about this with Monsignor Balducci, that was facilitated by my very good friend Paula Harris, who's an angel in this field. And Monsignor Balducci was a senior theologian, actually a demonologist for the Pope, Pope John Paul. And we were talking about this. He says, oh, it's so ridiculous. He says, we all know, of course, if they were a threat, it'd all be over. And he said, and I love it, with classic Italian flourish, very tall patrician figure, I think taller than I am. And he said, lower than humanity, there cannot exist in the universe. It was hilarious. I was in his apartment overlooking the Vatican. And it was a very interesting perspective from this senior theologian. Now, he did say that, however, there's an attempt to confuse people with things from other dimensions that are like demons or even angels with ETs. But he says, you know what? Angels, and by inference, demons, don't need flying saucers. But people, because of the strangeness of how an interstellar civilization going through dimensions can appear, people will conflate them or confuse them with either a demon or an angel. Guess what? The intelligence community loves that you're confused. And they put things out to further confuse you. To wit, mutilations. Okay, there's a man, Denver, very eminent medical doctor, fellow physician, hematologist, oncologist named Dr. John Altshuler. His uncle was the great General Jimmy Doolittle of World War II, who was sent over to the European theater during World War II by FDR to look into Foo Fighters. Yes, it's a rock group. Hello, Dave Grohl. But it was originally the object seen in World War II that the Nazis thought was a secret U.S. Allied weapon. We thought was a secret Nazi weapon. General Doolittle went over there, investigated it, and they were these trans-dimensional objects, spheres, balls of energy that would go around our aircraft, go down the center aisle of the planes, right between the men, out the other side, and this and that. And he came back and reported to FDR, and this is during World War II, that, and I'm quoting, he said, sir, those are interplanetary vehicles. So that's how far back this goes, and how far back has been studied very seriously. And so Dr. John Altshuler had a knowledge of this, deep knowledge of this, from his uncle, who was this general. He then lived in Colorado where Snippy the horse, y'all remember Snippy the horse? The first so-called cattle mutilation was a cattle that was a horse. He was called out because he was a pathologist, hematologist, pathologist, and he was interested in this. So he went out, began to study this in great detail, concluded they were all being done by counterintelligence operations using extraordinary technologies that are all human, staging it to look alien for its fear factor and its psychological warfare value. When did he conclude that? Oh, long before An Alien Harvest was written by Linda Moulton Howe. And this is known in UFO circles. Now the question becomes, and this is a very big problem, what would compel someone to continue to report out to the public things that are extraterrestrial when it was established by the only true medical doctor and scientist in the field decades ago that it was a hoaxed, staged, false flag, supportive, in other words, an event supporting the false flag directive from the 50s. I told you this would be very bad news for all of you. and your belief systems. I do not apologize in a way because I think it's unfortunate. What's unfortunate is that the great heroes like Dr. Altshuler, who's passed away, who had knowledge and spoke of this, and a couple people in this room I think probably knew him, were run amok of and trampled underfoot. And the sensationalism of fear and the sensationalism of the evil aliens are here to eat us for lunch, and not only are they eating us for lunch and abducting us, they're mutilating us on top of it. Well, guess what? It's all a lie, a hoax.